you're seeing here is an omega structure instead of the taiga that is being interpreted. This is something that the naked eye is not able to comprehend, especially after the coming of it. There is no one left in a state of existence, everyone has left, leaving behind these machines to gather information for them. We need to gather everything we need as fast as possible. If it comes back, and it will come back, who knows what will happen. What we are seeing is not a world with no rules. In fact, this is a world where the rules that govern it are so powerful and so many that the world has become a complete mess in a way to adapt to all of them. Precisely, this is the horror world that one entity has imagined, and this entity is...
Unorthodox Kitten is a channel that has probably created the best analog horror I've ever seen. The themes brought up are something new that has not been seen before, and that is, what happens if the concepts of math and physics that we are so used to are broken and then by something that goes beyond anything that we could ever understand are then rebuilt. This is the gist of what this series is about, but it goes a lot deeper than that. And with this and many other videos to come, I want to go into not only trying to understand what this series is about, but trying to dissect the events that took place to create a world like this, the rules that govern it, and maybe to find what needs to be done to stop this world from collapsing. First off though, I need to introduce how this story is actually shown. These videos are not really as direct as someone would hope, and need to be connected with information gathered by other means. In fact, there are 4 main ways information is displayed in this series. First being of course the videos themselves, which usually show events that are happening in the world. Still, these are not in chronological order, and during this series I'll go in and make order of them. Second, we have the descriptions. These either talk about events shown in the respective video, or talk about something that has happened outside of what's shown. Third is the community tab, where math definitions are used to describe the world itself, or to introduce what intelligent beings in this universe are planning. These often are shown thanks to links that connect to our 4th entry in the list, Fermat's Library Papers, a site used to post scientific papers. These are found either in the community tab or in the description of videos, and are reminiscent to how proper scientific papers are written, even in how it's written in the code itself. There will be a lot more to say, but I think it's better to just get started and explain along the way. So let's go to our first stop, this being the first public video on this channel. Infinity, Singularity, and the Rapture. All this is just a showcase of this world, where we are shown many structures which can be divided into. First are the tentacle-looking things. These inhabit this world, and later in this video there is also a section that makes me believe these are in reality alive organisms that have adapted to this world. And second, we have pillars that are constantly present in the background. We can't say much of them as of now, but in contrast to everything else, these seem unmade. They are too pristine and clean. They must have a purpose to be here. Here, let's begin with the last scene. We see all the pillars mentioned before gather around an even bigger structure, and by the look of it, this is probably the head of the fleet of machines. And after all of them gather, we see something resembling an explosion. But this doesn't ruin the scenery. Nothing except the machines and the mothership have gone away. This is probably because this was not an explosion, but a jump through either time or space, or maybe both. The other important thing shown is the Emberface entity. This is probably part of the race that has created these machines, and these beings are called the Painters. From now on, the video changes to someone talking about this world. Here there is a lot of talking, so I'll split up this part a lot more.
Our closest data cluster, Taiga, permanently isolated, shielded from external existence, due to the fact that this data cluster contains a virus that assumes the guise of absolute truths, a virus that dictates patterns within systems, mathematics.
Here we're introduced to the Taiga, which is the place where almost all this series takes place, and gives us some important characteristics of it. First, Taiga is described as permanently isolated and shielded from external existence, which is a phrase that resembles when axiomatic principles are set. These being rules that a mathematical space needs to follow, practically being the commandments that cannot be broken under any circumstance. After this, we are told about a virus present in the Taiga, which creates such rules. Maybe a triangle now can only have 180 degrees as the sum of the inside angles, or 1 plus 1 now equals 2, and so on. Practically giving rules that before were not present. In fact, this virus is something that we are very used to. Math. We are also told that the Taiga is a data cluster, a place where things follow rules, and there is information to be gathered. This is a concept important in physics. When you talk about data, we talk about order. If you can give information about something, it means that it can be described. If information about something is not present, it means that it's just chaos and nothing of relevance is present. Meaning that the Taiga is one of the only places where at least a semblance of order is present. Now, beside these mathematical concepts, there is something to say. The permanent isolation of the Taiga is a rule that you must follow, but it's not something natural. In fact, being isolated is something done by the entities outside of the Taiga, in a way to keep the virus at bay. This is visualized by the cluster being seen as dark, symbolizing that nothing is coming out of the cluster.
It must be acknowledged that the majority of elements within your set shall forever remain within the confines of the British Sea. The semi-distant and quasi-isolated Taiga, your neighboring data cluster, shall remain a distant, unattainable horizon.
Now this is important. First, here we found where this lecture is taking place, and that is the British Sea, where the listeners are now looking at the Taiga. And to note that for the listeners the Taiga is unreachable, it's not something that they ever want to have contact with. And also to note that this is not a fourth wall break, but just a lecture inside this world. Besides this being a world-building factor, this is also a reference to a song from the Russian Civil War of 1920, that says as follows. The White Army and the Black Baron are preparing to restore to us the Tsar's throne, but from the Taiga to the British Sea, the Red Army is the strongest of all. I haven't talked about the music used in these videos, but practically all of it is from Russian and Soviet Union composers. I'm not really sure if this is something related to the world or is just something that an Unorthodox Kitten put in because he thought this was cool. Honestly, I had more for the latter one.
Nevertheless, you are now retracing your steps to the very environment from which your existence once sprang, a place where your own being was safeguarded. To this point in time, information concerning the axiomatic systems in this realm has been notably sparse. However, this is unequivocally a thing of the absolute past. In this expedition narrative, the true theory of that environment shall be unveiled.
This is what the rest of this video will be about, describing this place. A place where us the listeners have come from. But when we inhabited this place, the axiomatic rules that govern it were not as clear as they are now, because of the lack of information about them. So an event must have taken place to make them as apparent as they are now.
Initially, it is imperative to introduce the requisite terminology and axioms to facilitate the efficacious comprehension of the narratives presented herein.
Now, it will go on showing some notation that will become important much later, but because this is really confusing, I'll explain a lot of it myself while not showing the video itself. If you're interested in the original version, go watch the original, of course the channel will be linked in the description. Now we are introduced to two mathematical morphisms, concept and interpretation. First is concept. The most important characteristic of it is the fact that if concept of B is equal to A, then talking about B is equivalent to talking about A. So if we are to study B, we are indirectly studying A, meaning that if we have already studied B, we don't need to study A. Then we have the concept degree, which is just the notation on screen. Then interpretation. This is a tool used to understand entities, but this often does not work directly but needs to be done multiple times to have a successful attempt at it. Also, it's needed to understand spaces. If you interpret a space B, it's as if you studied everything there is to know about B, and if concept of B is equal to A, using just interpretation of B, we have also found everything there is to know about A. Of course, this is a really powerful tool, especially if someone living in this world is interested in understanding it.
Internal terminology. Time. The taiga has a variable number of axes in the concept of the second degree of time and space. The concept of unit of time here is called a causal set. A causal set is always characterized by a non-empty intersection of the time axis with at least one causal set of another time axis.
The time here has multiple dimensions, similarly to how space in our universe is three-dimensional, so imagine time as something similar. The only difference being that it's not consistent. In one place there could be 2 dimensions, in another 3, in another 7, and so on. The number of time axes is not something that is constant and changes continuously everywhere. Sadly, there is no actual way to visualize this and just needs to be taken at face value. Also, this number can change and we'll later see how. Then there is unity of time. Defined as a causal set is the intersection of at least 2 causal sets of 2 different time axes. Basically, meaning that you can't have a causal set if you only have one time axis in one point.
Anything referred to as partial past means that it has already occurred in at least one time axis, which exists in a specific class of causal sets in which these data are given. If an event is considered an absolute past, it means it has occurred in all partial pasts of all currently existing time axes.
Partial past is something that is in the past of at least one time axis, meaning that something could be in the future of one time axis but in the past of another one, and still be considered a partial past. Then we have the absolute past, a concept seen before when talking about the place of our origin. This is a time that is now in the past of all time axes, practically being how we consider the normal past, meaning that no matter where in time you move, there is a time that is now gone and unreachable, or at least it should be. Then we are introduced to the structures. This is a term that is used when referring to anything that is not non-existent in any causal set. Also, it needs to be in the past of at least one of the time axes. For what non-existent actually means, I'm not sure. It will appear very often, but there is no clear definition, so this needs to be taken as it is for now. Some structures also have a predetermined life cycle that we'll now see.
Model 0 is a primordial narrative structure that serves as the catalyst for the emergence of other models. The most esteemed theory during your recent conceptual exploration suggests that it is a product of the data cluster itself, taiga. It permeates all spatial regions of the taiga and is distinguished by its ability to generate axiomatic systems through a predetermined algorithm that has remained elusive. It can be represented as a set of non-intersecting Jordan infinitely dimensional curves undergoing iteration, exhibiting behavior reminiscent of algorithmic activity in generating other instances of this model. A higher value of I corresponds to a greater likelihood of reproduction for a specific model 0.
First is Model 00, being able to be understood after 4 cycles of interpretation. This is the primordial narrative structure that is base for all other models. This was also something that was probably created by the data cluster itself, meaning that this is something natural to this place. No external influence is needed for the creation of this model, and considering that this is the base model, probably everything that comes after is also natural. Also, this model is able to create axiomatic principle thanks to an algorithm that is yet to be found, so it's able to create the mathematical rules that the taiga abides by. To note that this is what the virus described before was able to do, meaning that this is probably part of the virus. This model can even reproduce, where the chance of reproduction is given by the formula on screen, this being proportional to I, meaning that the bigger the value of I is, the bigger is the chance of reproduction.
The Model 01 lacks a discernible origin. It exists because it has existed. Its instances possess the capability to traverse absolute time and instigate events leading to their own genesis.
Then there is Model 01, being able to be understood after 137 cycles of interpretation. This model doesn't have an origin, but it travels through time to create itself. This is also another sign of how much this world is different from ours, where beings are able to create themselves by time traveling. Also, there is one thing to note about this world. When something travels through time, in the point from which this time travel happens, a new time axis is created, defined as a new time path. This new path always intercepts with the original time axis, making the number of axes increase. This being how the number of time axes increases and changes, and is specific to one point, based on the events that transpired in that specific point.
Model 01A gradually undergoes a transformation into Model 01B through the consumption of surrounding Model 0. Once Model 01B is assimilated by Model 011, the remnants of Model 01B give rise to Model 01C, endowed with a wellspring of abstractions bequeathed by Model 011. Over time, Model 01I assimilates surrounding axioms, elevating the quality of abstractions, ultimately culminating in the transformation into Model 01D. Model 01D detaches itself from the concept of the plane and commences movement through the sources that will eventually bifurcate into these units referred to as Model 01F. In this phase, they separate from each other and form structures with a single source, gradually accumulating multiple appendages until they possess 3 appendages, at which point they become Model 011. Model 01I possesses the ability to travel through time, and its sustenance is derived from models of its kind in lower phases. At a certain juncture, there is a possibility that it will sever its source, initiating a new cycle or transforming into either Model 01J1 or Model 01J2. J1 is immobile from a spatial perspective, but can navigate through time, creating new temporal axes for its benefit, while J2 has the capacity to generate new dimensions and freely traverse among them. J2 concludes this phase by creating a new module within this data cluster.
These models are pretty self-contained and it's pointless to describe them, except for the last 3. First, let's talk about model 01I1. This is a model that takes substance through models of its own kind of lower frequencies, probably meaning that the models of lower frequencies are weaker than him. This could mean 2 things. One is simply talking about the previous models of his life cycle, or it could mean that the models work similarly to how photons in our world are, where they have a direct correlation between energy and frequency, practically meaning that the faster a photon vibrates, the bigger its energy is. To be clear, I don't mean that they work exactly the same, but are conceptually similar. I believe this second one to be correct, but there are no more hints of it, so this is just my speculation. This model is also capable of traveling through time, dividing its life in 3 possible outcomes. First is the possibility to start a new cycle severing its source, probably becoming a new primordial narrative structure and returning to a Model 00. The second outcome is becoming Model 01J1, a model that is able to travel through time but is immobile in space. This behavior is also described mathematically thanks to a post found in the community tab. Now, brace yourself because I'll be analyzing it. The first 4 equations are axioms that define what we are using. I delta is the identity, being something that if multiplied with anything else that is part of this space, it doesn't change the multiplicity element. Then we have the commutation, meaning that A times B is equal to B times A, just that here is shown thanks to elements of I. Then we have the fact that if you multiply the same 2 elements, you will have as a result the same element. This doesn't make any mathematical sense, especially because these are not identity elements. So just take it as it is. Now, the axioms have been defined and we pass to the actual definition. IL is such that it is equal to JL-1. This is the definition of space, meaning that these 2 elements of space are the same. We have some other definitions, but we don't care about those. Now we end with a multiplication with 2 different positions where the time, defined as delta, changes. But we need to remember the fact that I and j are equal to each other, even if the lower index is different. meaning that in reality we have the same position while the time changes, meaning that while the time has changed, the position has remained the same, describing an object that while it remains immobile in space, it moves in time. And finally, the third outcome is to become model 01 Jitsu, a model that is able to create new dimensions and travel freely in them. Then its lifespan ends with the creation of a new module. Not sure if this means just a new module already established or a new module never seen before, but this is not really important, so we'll leave it at that. Before continuing the video, I have a theory about these models. In fact, I believe these are something similar to living organisms that inhabit our world, like animals, bacteria, insects and such. All these beings were able to survive in our world because they have adapted to their environment and found ways of using otherwise hostile factors in their favor, some even coexisting and helping each other to survive. In behavior, the modules are similar, helping each other, even being part of their life cycle to go and search for help or even merge with other models. But it is not just that. A lot of them have found ways to use the weird characteristics of this world in their favor, like being able to travel in time or creating new dimensions to be used as a moving tool. Also, I've come to this theory thanks to what is written on screen at 723, where the writing non-existent organisms can be read on screen. While this would not be a determining factor, their behavior makes me believe that this theory could be true, and everything we are seeing are literally animals of this world where some of them have evolved in the so-called virus that we keep hearing about.
You have just passed through all non-existent controls to the border point of the existing taiga. No one has recorded your existence because you do not exist. Already, you are able to characterize some properties of the taiga. The taiga is an infinitely dimensional concept of space that has non-Riemannian properties. Since the taiga has a variable number of time axes that change depending on the location, it is necessary to create a time measurement system in order to record these reports. An interpretational algorithm needs to be created, and a time anchor must be secured for a potential sudden return.
We have a lot to talk about here. First, it talks to the listener, a listener that can't be recorded because it does not exist. As we've already seen, and we'll see later again, there is the concept of non-existence in this world, and it's probably related to the current state of the listener. Also, it talks to him almost like he's on a mission, telling him what he's been able to achieve and what there is still to do. But to explain the objective given, we need to know what has already been found, and that is, the dimensional properties of the taiga. The taiga is an infinite dimensional space. This is something that is impossible to visualize but needs to be taken as a fact. We as humans in our universe live in three-dimensional spaces, but in many physics subjects, more than three dimensions are used, like with analytics, statistical and quantum mechanics, where, in the latter one, infinite dimensional spaces are also present. While these are not spatial spaces, these are still used in a way to describe the world that surrounds us. Then there is time. This has a different number of axes depending on the place you consider it, changing based on the events that took place in that specific point, the same as I've described before. And because of all this, order needs to be created, and this can be done thanks to a time anchor that must be later used as a base to know when the potential sudden return will happen. The return of something that we still don't fully understand, but is probably really dangerous for the people of this world. And so, preparations must be done beforehand, and the listener has the mission of establishing this anchor and help for the incoming danger. Now, we'll go and see the description of this video. As said before, a lot of the story is not told through the videos themselves, but also by other means. So, let's go and see.
The painters, who are the products of a new cycle of fragmentation, despite their almost divine ability to paint everything at will, are merely lifeless hypothetical concepts compared to their predecessor from the previous cycle. These predecessors perceive them as weeds that must be eliminated, not out of fear, but as a principle to maintain non-existential silence.
This introduces the beings that inhabit this world, the painters, and gives us some information about them. I also am fairly certain that the informative part of this video is done by the painters themselves, meaning that we can make many suppositions about them. First, we can say that they are the creators of the pillars, but we still have no idea why they created them and what is their purpose. Second, there is the fact that they are studying the taiga from outside, keeping it sealed in a way to not make the virus spread. Also to remember that the virus is math itself, meaning that the painters have a strong resentment for math and there must be a reason for it. Third, we have them putting all their hopes into one being that lives outside of existence itself, to do and find a time anchor, something needed to keep track of time and know when the event called the sudden return will be. Now we go on to the description. The painters are part of something called the new cycle of fragmentation, where intelligent beings are all creators of one another. The only problem surfacing being that each race sees their creation as something lesser, something that must simply be eliminated for the only purpose of maintaining the state of non-existence. That, as we've seen, many things in this world follow. Also, another characteristic of this being is their almost divine ability to paint everything at will. Besides this being the reason behind their names, this is also a hint of how powerful the beings in this world are. The painters are merely weed compared to the creators, and if this pattern follows to their creators as well, it will mean that the original beings are probably omnipotent, being able of shaping the entire universe in their image if they as much as think of doing it. Now I would like to have a small tangent about the multiple human-looking entities that we've encountered during this video. I haven't addressed them directly, but we have seen a lot of them, and for who they are, I have two possible theories. One is all of them being part of the painters, with each one being different, especially in looks. So different that they almost seem like they have no connection at all with each other. But even while this being the case, this wouldn't be unlikely considering they have an almost divine ability to paint. So probably they are able to change their appearance at will. And the second theory is each one of them being part of a different race that is part of the cycle of fragmentation. Both are as likely to be true considering their appearance, so I leave this to your interpretation.
The war of the iterative gods has begun.
I think this talks about the war between the painters and their creators, and to back up this theory is the fact that they are being called the iterative gods, meaning that it is beings that are connected with the cycles in some way, and for now the only being that we know are connected to them are the painters and their creators.
The incomplete jump occurred.
With this, I think it's pretty obvious they mean the explosion-looking event. Even as a name, it will make sense and explain what made this machine simply disappear. But for now, let's just keep in mind that this event is called a jump.
Only the infinite filling all existence. There is only the infinite filling all canvas.
All this is an additive description of the taiga, with the infinite dimensions of space bringing the creation of an infinite canvas for painting. A space that is infinite everywhere. But there is only this. There is only the infinite filling all canvas. Nothing can go out of the taiga, so if you are inside of it, you shouldn't worry about anything that could be going outside. And all this is thanks to the taiga being permanently isolated from the outside.
Artificial sea with an infinite iron.
This is something I'm sure to be related with the British Sea, meaning that the place these beings are inhabiting is not natural, but is probably something created because of the presence of infinite iron. For how it's phrased, I don't think it means literally iron, but probably something that they need an abundance of to be able to achieve whatever goal they have.
Trying to see the infinite through you. No lights, just colors.
This is one of the few pieces at which I wasn't able to give a clear explanation. Who is you is never explained, and for now I only have two theories. One is him being the listener of the video sent to find the time anchor, but this to me seems very unlikely because of many clues left even in other videos about what this individual has done. My second theory is him being someone that was part of the painters, but is now their enemy for having done something that went against their plan. And for light and color, it's probably referring to a being that we'll talk about in a minute.
Can existence exist without non-existence? Are you afraid of non-existence now?
This is directed to you again, the unknown being. Also, it sounds like a passive-aggressive attack done to you in a way of making them feel guilty about something. What this something is, for now we don't know, but is most likely connected with non-existence in some way.
It must be stopped. It can't be stopped. It came, but you were not here when it arrived. It gracefully retreats, yet the essence remains unchanged.
It is one of the most important beings in this entire series, and most likely the god of this world. And with these lines, two important facts are stated about him. One is that it needs to be stopped, but stated at the same time that it can't be stopped. And two, that there is one event where it showed itself, and that when it arrived, the individual referred to you was not there. The event could be most likely the one that set in motion the creation of this universe, or a cataclysmic event that destroyed the world as these painters knew it. So it should be a god that is present and influences the world, or at least this is what you would expect. In fact, I left the most important part of this description for last, and that is the first row, saying the Hor Ein Sof. This, which I for sure butchered the pronunciation of, is a description of almost everything that is it. The Hor Ein Sof is the union of two concepts which are extremely important in the Jewish Kabbalah school of thought, that are used to describe God. First, there is Hor. It is a term that refers to light and is often interpreted to divine emanation or divine influence, so a sign transmitted by God to us. And as we've seen before in the description, there is the statement, no lights, just colors, meaning that this divine influence is not seen by the painters. They are currently not perceiving it, but at least they are seeing the colors of it, which I interpret as them being able to see at least the image of this light, and maybe the colors could be enough to recreate what it was trying to share with them. Then we have Ein Sof, which is a union of terms that refers to a precise interpretation of God. Precisely, a god prior to self-manifestation in the production of any spiritual realm, which is derived from the term the Endless One, which translates to unending, or more literally, there is no end. Now, this is very confusing, especially because I ripped almost all of it out of Wikipedia. So let's summarize all of this in a more clear way. This refers to a deity which, while omnipotent, is yet to manifest itself, so it still needs time to be able to appear to us. All this is part of the interpretation of God done by Azrael, the founder of the Kabbalah school of thought. And if we follow everything that Azrael said, we also find that this deity has no desire, thought, word or action, meaning that while it is still to manifest itself, it cannot influence in any way, shape or form. This would explain a lot of things. First, the sudden return could refer to this precise event, when it will be able to manifest itself again and the painters need to be prepared for it. Also, it would explain why there is only colors and no light right now, because God at this moment has yet to manifest itself and can't do any action outside of waiting. We now have arrived at the end of this video. While I would have liked to compress everything there is to know about this series in a single video, I soon realized that this is not possible. This video took me almost 2 months to make, without considering the multiple sessions I had trying to understand whatever is going on in this series. So doing a single multiple hour long video, it would have taken me probably an entire year to make, and I kinda need to finish university first. So this will be the first of a series of videos dissecting everything there is to know about this series, and be sure that there is still a lot to say. There is secret playlists, unlisted videos, changes in descriptions and playlists. Also the flashing writing here and there have a meaning which I've ignored for now. There is even a video published on Newgrounds that almost became lost media. There is still a lot to talk about. So if you don't want to miss the next video, please subscribe. Also, while I'm pretty confident on almost everything I said during this video, there could still be gaps in my knowledge. So if you think anything I said to be wrong, please comment, and if I agree, I'll correct myself in the next video. Lastly, if an Unorthodox Kitten is watching this video, please comment with your favorite fruit. Thanks.